everyone. If you are preparing for ACCA FR examination, have you ever wondered why so many students lose easy marks? Then this video is for you. Today, most of ACCA FR students fail not because they don't know the syllabus, they do fail because they can't answer like the examiner. Today, I'm going to break down financial reporting September December 25, entire examiner's report, and show you what exactly the examiner is expected from you. Section by section, question by question, and we will learn how exactly pick those marks which is lost by others. My name is Kavya Ravichandran. I'm a financial reporting faculty. Welcome to the session, guys. Let's start without delaying. So, if you see, this is the official report which is released by ACCA. So, it is not a model answer. It does explain what questions tested, where students went well, where students didn't go right, why marks were lost, and how a future candidate, that is you guys, should answer to score those marks. Think of it as a how marker think, like how examiners guide. Okay. So most failures came from misreading the requirement, ignoring the adjustments. I don't talk about using the wrong formula even when the correct one was given, writing generic explanation instead of using the scenario. So as we all know that section A and section B of your financial reporting do test objective test, where a small mistake can lose the entire 2 marks of the question. These questions are quick but unforgiving, guys. The very common errors that I have seen from the students are they forget most of the adjustments, or time apportionment is not done, or discounting factor is not calculated, or maybe it could be a lease exemptions and I'm not doing the time apportion properly. Every syllabus area is testable. Guessing doesn't work out here. That is about section A and B. And when it comes to section C, where most of the students face struggle, they feel it is more challenge. Why do they feel it is more challenge? Let's say ratios in theory, it's very difficult to explain. I just give a generic explanation. I don't apply it on the question. Said company A is better than company B with no reason is given. I ignore the parts of the requirement. So, I forget one of the items. So, these are all the common mistakes that students do. So, which we would like to reverse it and show where the high scoring areas are. So, where, we do scenario facts, like why we explain why ratios are changed, and we treat one of gains, like everything whatsoever that we have in general that as a student that you have to do, I'll show you in the examination how do you have to actually bring it upon. So if I have to get into this particular document, it is officially released by ACCA people, where they have given the comments on questions on section A, section B, and section C. So without delaying, let's get into the section A and the very first question. See here, if you can see, they have not taken the entire document. They have taken 4 questions in section A, where they felt it is more challenging to the students. And these, they think like students went wrong and they could have gone right. And it is officially released by ACCA. So if you see question 1, what this question is tested. So let's read the question. Global company acquired 55% of the ordinary equity shares of Stick Company on 1st June 20x8. When the retained earnings of Stick Company were $500,000, on that date, Stick Company sold items of machinery to Global Company for proceeds of $560,000. Now, the total carrying amount of the machinery in Stick Company's general ledger was 448,000 immediately prior to the sale, and the remaining useful life is given as 10 years. Now, whenever a question is given, I always do a reverse psychology, and it works to a lot of students too. See, this question has tested about group retained earnings, and there is an intra-group profit elimination not because the goods have been sold between the companies, not because the goods have been interchanged between the group. It's because a plant and machinery is being sold within the group, that is between the parent and subsidiary company. Why do I call Global Company as parent company? Because they are 55% holding in Stick Company, and Stick is treated as subsidiary. Now, most of the common mistake that we do is I would always see what is my year ending. I will always see Is it a mid-year acquisition or full-year acquisition? I see we have acquired stake company on 1st Jan 20x8. And the question clearly says at 31st May 20x9, or what were the consolidated retained earnings presented in the group financial position at 31st May xg. That means they're asking, they're asking in the year ending, what is the value that we can expect to have from 1st June 31st May, so whole 1 year. There is no time apportionment required. Always keep this in mind. Right. Next, if you see at 31st May x9, the retained earnings were 1.66 million and 740 for both parent and subsidiary. The question is, we have to find out the group retained earnings. So now if this is the case, normally what do we do? Let's do this question for an understanding. So if you ask me, I see who is selling to whom. Yeah. And I will always see the requirement. The requirement is about the retained earnings. It is not about the post-acquisition profit. The retained earnings affects both parent and subsidiary company, right? So I see there is a sale of non-current asset for a proceeds of $560,000, right? And where the carrying amount on the sale of was how much? For $48,000. So we can consider the sale of non-current asset is at profit. My proceeds are $560,000 and I sold it with the carrying amount of how much? $448,000. Where this shows what? This shows the profit element to be brought in here. Correct. That is what they're asking about, which typically be reduced from where? Which typically be reduced from your group retained earnings. So $560,000 minus $448,000, you have a profit of $112,000. So this is the profit element to which company? The seller company. Who is the seller company? Stick company sold items of machinery. That means we will go reduce this 112 from which company's post acquisition profit? From the stick company's post acquisition profit. Simple. Second, this question also talks about there is always an excess depreciation charged because the asset has been sold at the fair value. So to be honest, if it was with the stick company, I would have charged a depreciation of $448,000 divided by 10 years. So maybe 44,800. But instead, I sold it. So the buyer company would have charged depreciation at $560,000 by 10 years. That is $56,000. How much extra depreciation that the buyer company has gone ahead and charged? 56 minus 44,800. That will be 11,200. Now two adjustments I have to make. I have to eliminate the profit element from a seller company and excess depreciation has to be added back to whom? Added back to the buyer company. This is what the typical question is asked. So now what do? We take the parent company's retained earnings, that is $1,660,000. Yeah. And in this, I go reduce the perp element because I go add back the excess depreciation value because it belongs to which company? It belongs to the parent company. Who's the parent? Global company. Because the sale was happened by the seller to the parent. The parent would have charged excess depreciation, add back the excess depreciation to them. But seller company we need to find out what is the post acquisition profit. See, understand the post acquisition profit that you can see here is when I acquired them, they have a profit of how much? They have a retained earnings of $500,000. At the year ending, they have 740. That means my post acquisition profit is $240,000. But in that, it's my job to reduce how much? 112,000 as the reduction in perp. In this, you will get a share of 55%. So I will add what? I will add 1,660,000 plus I will also take 11,200, right? And then we also take plus $240,000 minus $112,000, and in that I will give 55% share. That will be of 7,400. I add all of them and I say my group retained earnings will be of how much? Group retained earnings will be of 1741,600. So this is what the question is testing. What we have done, what most of the students have done. Let's see. Yeah. So they would have thought parent sold the asset. Let's see. What is the correct answer is 1741,600, what we have calculated. So what is this test? The question test. The sale of machinery, where IFRS 10 consolidated financial statements. Most of the candidates should know how does the impact on both parent and subsidiary company. For one company, it's going to be a profit element which we have to eliminate because it's a group. You have to treat it as one single entity, one single economic entity. You can't treat it as two different companies. And the second part is whichever company who purchased, they would have charged excess depreciation. It's our job to go ahead and reverse the excess depreciation and eliminate the profit element, because you can't have profit between your own company. So this is what typically the question is getting asked. But what most students have done, see, let's read the answer. So the answer is very clearly what? The answer is very clearly, according to your IFRS 10, we have to consider the profit for the year being how much? Profit for the year being $112,000. So out of 240 as my post-acquisition profit, I eliminate $112,000. In baki ka jo bhi amount milta hai, like in that I will give 55% to the parent company, 45% to the non-controlling interest. Plus, as a purchaser, as a buyer, as a parent company, I would have charged excess depreciation, because we charge depreciation on the amount the asset has been purchased, not the carrying amount of the opposite person. So I would have gone ahead and charged a 10-year depreciation on 560, not on 448. So when you combine these two information together, it's your job to go ahead and eliminate the extra impact of your depreciation. Excess depreciation of 11,200 has to be eliminated. This is what typically the question is asked. But anyway, choice, the answer has to be 1,741,600. But where did candidates go wrong? Yeah, where did candidates go wrong? So if you can see, forgot the depreciation adjustment. This 11,200 people started forgetting about it. Second, they applied 55% to everything. No, you have to apply only on the post-acquisition profit. Then they thought the parents sold the asset. It's a complete wrong direction now. You will end up reducing the PERP from parent company, or provision for unrealized profit from parent company, and excess depreciation from subsidiary company, which is completely vice versa treatment, which is not supposed to happen. That is what typically most of the students went wrong in question 1. Right? Let's move to question number 2. Let's read the question number 2. Let's see what does it say. Gamara company acquired 30% of Shinty's company ordinary equity shares for 207 million. By looking at this, I clear cut know 30% acquisition is nothing but associate, right? So this was acquired on 1st January 20x5. See, whenever you see a date of acquisition, always close your eyes, go to the requirement, see what is the requirement asking. If you can see the requirement, they're asking what is the carrying amount of the investment in the associate. That means like what is the value of associate in the Gamara's group's consolidated financial position at which date? At 30th September X5. Is it a mid-year acquisition? Very much yes. That means whatever profit which has been earned by Shinty's company will not be given as a whole, but you have to prorate it for only the 9 months period, like that is from Jan 20x5 till 30th September x5, in accordance with IAS 28, investment in associates and joint ventures to the nearest million. So now what is this question test? Let's do this question. Yeah, let's do this question first. See, I could see the question clear-cutly talking about Gamara acquired 30% of Shinty's company. Good. For 207 million. So what is the cost of investment that we can expect to have? The cost of investment is 207 million. On 10th June X4, Shinty company paid a dividend of 22 million. Shinty company's profit for the year ended is 30th September 20x5 was 62 million. Guys, very simply what I said, first take the share of profit. How much is the share of profit from associate? It's going to be whole 1 year के लिए 62 million, but you can give only for the 9 months 12. For how much percentage? Only 30%, because I have acquired you at only 30%. So if you do the calculation, you shall give a profit of how much? You shall give a profit of 207, 62 million into 9 by 12 into 30%. I'm getting somewhere around 13.95. That should be the share of profit. We made a profit of 62 million. That is for the whole year, but I acquired only on 1st Jan X5. So it's my job to go ahead and divide it with 9 by 12. And on that, we will get only 30% share. That is 13.95 million. But also people understand, they also paid a dividend. See, when they paid a dividend, don't prorate it for the number of months. Dividend is not paid for the number of months, right? But in this 22 million, all the shareholders ke liye, they would have paid 22 million. For the parent company, that is Gamara, they would have paid only how much? They would have paid only 6.6 million. So you have to take only 30% of it, 6.6 million. Okay. So if it is 6.6 million, yeah, if it is 6.6 million, I go reduce the dividend from the calculation. Why do I reduce the dividend from the calculation? See, understand, I thought I have an investment value of 207 million, and whatever the profits that they earn belongs to me. Whatever the profit that they earn belongs to me. So I added to my investment. But when they settle certain amount, my investment value goes down because they paid off. I no more will receive that entire 13.95 million. In that 6.6 million though, I have received in the name of dividends. So I can expect to have the value of my investment will be 214.35 million. Now the problem is, what went wrong? The answer is option A. Yeah. But what went wrong by the students? What most of the students has done? So the correct answer is A. I agree to the point. Let's read the but this question test. IAS 28 investment and associate and joint ventures. We need to know how to calculate the carrying amount of an investment in an associate, deducting the group share of dividends and adding the group share of profits to the original investment. Very rightly said. You'll add the profit but you deduct the dividend, because profit is your earning, it increases your investment, but dividend is a cash payment which reduces your investment. Once the dividend is paid, you can't say like pay me again. You have to reduce your investment value, right? So this typically we calculate whatever the calculation I have done, they have done the same calculation. But what went wrong by the students? Where did candidates go wrong? Most of the candidates, yeah, ignored time apportionment, 9 by 12. They ignored dividends. They added full year profit. Yeah, most of them did what? They added full year profit. They ignored time apportionment, and they also did what? They also completely ignored the dividends, which is typically not to be done. Fair enough? Yeah. Let's move to question number 3. What does question number C talks about? Question number 3 talks about Profish Company acquired 80% of Smokehouse Company ordinary equity shares on 1st August 20x6. Good. We have acquired. Both companies correctly recognized revaluation increase on land in the year ended 31st July 20x1. Okay, x7. In accordance with IAS 16 PP, the revaluation surplus balances are given like of individual financial statements. Fair enough. No problem. Again, always see, is it a full year acquisition? Yes, it's a full year acquisition because you have acquired them on 1st August X6 and the year ending in the question is 31st July X7. Read the next one. What is the balance on the revaluation surplus in the Profish Group consolidated statement of financial position as at 31st July X7 in accordance with IFRS 10 consolidated financial statements? We are asking what should be the balance of revaluation surplus of Profish Group. Guys, what are they typically asking for? They are asking for total revaluation surplus, how much it should be. You tell me what happens here. I take the entire parent company's value, that is 375 million, plus I will only take the post acquisition reserves of SMOC sub company. What is my post acquisition reserve that you can expect to have? See, at the date of acquisition, I had a reserve of 50 million. Year ending, we have a reserve of 75 million. Year ending, we have a reserve of how much? 75 million. Can I simply say that the increase, the post acquisition is nothing but 25 million? So in 25 million, I can only give 80 percentage to the parent company. So that means I will add 20 million to the parent company. Total, the revaluation surplus has to be 395 million. Then what happens to the baki ka 5 million? Goes to non-controlling interest. If something is happening after acquisition, it's your job to give the respective share to the parent, the owners of the parent, also to the non-controlling interest. So out of this 25 million, 20 should goes to parent, 5 million should go to the non-controlling interest, isn't it? Yeah.
No.
So let's see what students went wrong. That is the correct answer. But what we have done, the candidates have gone wrong. Candidates were relatively even spread across the 3 or 4 options. What happened? They took group share of total surplus. Yeah, they took the parent plus they took the subsidiary balances blindly. Guys, anything which is happening now, anything which is happening after acquisition, please give a share to non-controlling interest and parent according to the shares. Only post acquisition results. That is where we went wrong on this question. Right? Let's move to the question number 4. The question number 4 talks about on 1st March, B Coal Company invested in a 5-year loan note. Okay. With a nominal value of 3.5 million. Guys, if I'm investing in something, that means it's a financial asset to me. Keep this straight. Financial asset to me. B Coal Company received a discount of $398,000 on the nominal value. It is not the final value. Okay. A loan note pays interest 7% in arrears and has an effective interest rate of 10%. Fair enough. The financial asset is classified as amortized cost. You have to calculate the carrying amount of B Coal Company's financial asset at 20th February X7 in accordance with IFRS 9 financial instruments. Now, what we have to typically do, we have to find out the closing balance. So first for this, I need to find out what? I need to find out the opening balance. What will be my opening balance? See, I am purchasing something. The nominal value being how much? The nominal value is 3.5 million. So where the promised rate, that is coupon rate of interest, which in this scenario 7% will always be applied on this 3.5 million. I will get every year cash inflow. That is what kind of cash inflow? Interest cash inflow of how much? 7% of 3.5 million. And that should typically be $245,000. Okay. But my effective rate of interest ultimately, because see, understand what will be my fair value, guys? My fair value will not be 3.5 million. It is 3.5 million minus I got a discount of $398,000. My fair value of this transaction is how much, people? My fair value of this transaction has a nominal value, or it has a value of $3,102,000. This is my opening balance. So normally what do I have to do? I'll take my opening balance. I'm writing it here. My opening balance is 3,102,000 plus add the finance cost at 10% effective rate of interest, that is 3,102,000 and minus, yeah,
Right.
I'm sure I'm right, yeah, and minus what? Minus $245,000. You shall get a closing balance. This is what the closing balance is. If we do that, I think I should be getting a closing balance of how much? I think I should get a closing balance of $3,167,000. But It is not enough, people. You should see the trap which is given in the question. The trap is they're asking, calculate the carrying amount of B Coal company's financial asset. Yeah. So what do? We will have to go ahead and consider the closing balance is 3167. Look at this. The question is asked on 28th X7, wherein you purchased it on 1st March X5. So from 1st March X5 to 28th February X7, it is not 1 year, it is rather 2 years. You stop in year 1 calculation and you say 3167 is the right answer. No, you have to do 1 more year. So when you do 1 more year, same concept, take the opening balance of 3167, add a 10% of interest, reduce $245,000, you shall get the closing balance. So the answer has to be, the closest answer is 323,900 or $3,239,000, an approximate. Where could candidates go wrong? Like, what happened to this question? See, you ignore the discount or you use the wrong year balances can lead to a reduction in the marks to you. These are all the 4 identified good number of questions that the ACCA examiners thought in section C. A lot of students went wrong. Right? Okay. We'll move to section B, people. What happened in section B? We have a whole scenario. Okay. So the scenario based questions are section B. Let's read. Section B test knowledge of several IFRS accounting standards in more depth than section A, with 3 case questions worth 10 marks each. Like, we know what is section B. So they have selected one IFRS 16 question where most of the candidates did not perform well on this case. Always read the scenario. Important is reading the scenario. If you don't read the scenario, it is very, very difficult. What is the scenario that you all can see? Clock and Company entered 3 new leases for the year ended 31st March 20X5. The commencement date of all the 3 leases was at 1st April X4. Iska matlab 1 whole year of lease. First lease is plant. The present value of future lease payments prior to the payment of a deposit was $446,000. Okay. The deposit was $40,000. So you deduct $40,000 and it was paid on the commencement date. Fair enough. Fair enough. So the first of 5 annual installments of $110,000 was paid on 31st March X5. The interest rate is 11%. This is what they're giving. And they're talking about tablet device. The fair value of tablet device totaled around $26,000 at the commencement date, and they are considered as low value asset. So that means we have to consider that as lease exemption. The lease has a 3-year term, and the first 2 annual installments will be paid on 31st March X6. Fair enough. Then we have the next. What is the next that we have? Property. 1st April X4, we sold a property for its fair value of 7.4 million when the carrying amount of the property was 5 million. Clock and Company immediately leased the property back on 1st April X4, and the first of 5 annual installments of 1.6 million was paid, and the relevant 5-year discounting factor is given. It's about a proper sale and lease back. Let's see what are the questions. What are the question 1? Guys, I believe question 1 sometimes is not at all related to the theoretical part of the question here. They say the contract is a lease only if it has a specific characteristics. Okay. Which 2 of the following are characteristics of a contract which is a lease in accordance with IFRS 16? Because as far as I remember, I know 3 elements of lease which has to be there, bare minimum there. 1, the direction to use the asset or the right to control the asset the way that the lessee wants. Second, there should be a lease term with an identified asset which there cannot be substituted. And third, by default, there is a consideration which is included for the period of time that I'm going to use. These are all the elements as far as I know. Let's read. They say a period of time must be described only in terms of days or weeks or years. You serious? There is nothing which says ACCA has never told the lease has to only be measured in days, weeks or years. It could be in months also. Right? Yeah. So must should eliminate the answer. Okay. It conveys the right to control The use of an identified asset, fair enough. I think this is what I told, right? Could be an answer. We'll keep aside. It identifies the period of time over which the asset may be used. It does. It does. I'm not saying no to that. But if you look at, see, B and C looks like very good answer. But let's see D also to see if we can eliminate D. It automatically transfers the ownership of the underlying asset to the user. Guys, it doesn't automatically transfer. If you have commenced or you have agreed that I will go purchase, then you'll purchase. It doesn't automatically transfer any asset to any of them. So the option D is also not right. So hence my option has to be B and C. Now what has happened to the students? Let's see. They thought time must be expressed only in years. No. And they also thought ownership must transfer. It doesn't. So where the students went wrong? The students went wrong. Although almost all candidates identified B was correct, most candidates still answered. Like you combined a right answer with the wrong one. Either B and A or B and D, or where you thought like number of years. Understand, guys, it need not to be only in years. Sometimes I can keep the lease term to be the number of units that you produce in the machine also. Okay. And this purchase is completely an option. It is not a must decision. Right? Great. Let's move to the question number 2. So the question number 2 says, the interest expense was correctly accounted for during the year ended 31st March X5. No problem. Calculate the interest expense to be recognized on the planned lease liability for the year ended 31st March X6. See, what does this question says? Are you able to unwind the discount properly? This is what it says. So how do you do it? We will go check what is the present value of your lease liability. The present value of lease liability of your plant was how much? It was around 446,500, but that was prior to the payment of a deposit. Once you make a payment of the deposit, you can expect to have what? You can expect to have the balance being 446,500 minus $40,000. That should be apparently 406,500. Yeah, and the rate used is 11%. This question here is asking about for the year ending 31st March X6, not X5. Understand? When did you go ahead and got into the lease? You got into the lease on, all the lease was commenced on 1st April X4. That means they're asking about the interest expenses for the second year, not for the first year. So what will you do? Your calculation goes this way. Your calculation will be on your calculation will be on, first find out the opening balance. The opening balance would be how much? As I said, like 446,500 minus 40, it will be 406,500. It will be 406,500. You can say $407,000. So to this $407,000, you add 11% of interest, that is 45, and you reduce $110,000, should give you a closing balance of $342,000. This interest, whichever you calculate, this 45 goes for year ending X5, but I need to find out the year ending X6 के लिए. इसमें क्या होता है? So I will go ahead and consider the closing balance of first year will be the opening balance of second year. I'll take $342,000 multiplied with 11%. So when I take 11% of $342,000, you shall get 38. That should be the typical answer. So where you can round it off to, like, if you're getting any values, if you take any overall values, you can round it off to 38. Now again, in this question, where did the candidates go wrong? You might have calculated in year 1 instead of year 2. Or you might have not rounded it properly. Instead of 38, you ended up giving an answer of 37. Where you might misread the overall question. Okay, this could be the problem. Right? So let's go see to the question number 3 on the same adjustment. The question number 3 talks about Clock & Company intends to take an advantage of any exemption available under IFRS 16 leases. Fair enough. Select which of the following regarding exemptions available are true or false in accordance with IFRS 16 leases. So the election for leases for which underlying asset is of low value can be made on a lease by lease basis. So that means, see, you, if it is a low value asset, can you consider that as lease exempted asset, which we call it as lease by lease basis? Yes, it is true. But look at the statement 2. A class of underlying asset is a grouping of underlying asset of a similar value. No, guys. An identified asset is always identifiable separately. Correct? Yeah. So it's only about short-term leases and low-value leases. There is no grouping of assets here. So you might have done a pure guessing here, or syllabus coverage wouldn't have done. Correct? Yeah. So if you make an election for short-term lease, it should be made by all class of the underlying asset. So a class of underlying asset is a grouping of underlying asset of a similar value. I don't think so. That should be apparently false. The correct answer has to be statement 1 true, statement 2 false. And where did the students go wrong? The students went wrong in wrong guessing or not covering the whole syllabus area. Okay. That is about question number 3 on your section B. Let's move to question number 4 on your section B. What does it talks about? It talks about the annual installment, okay, for tablet devices or $16,000 each. What liability should be reported on the financial position as of 31st March X5, that is first year ke liye, regarding the tablet to the lease? See guys, understand, doesn't matter whether when you're making a payment, we have to always follow the accrual accounting. So when I follow the accrual accounting, I can simply say that understand that accrued expenses are going to be, if you can go back to the question, let's go back to the question once to have an understanding. See, I will pay the fair value of the tablet devices totaling $26,000 at the commencement date. They are considered as the low value. The lease has a 3-year where first of 2 annual installments will be paid on 31st March 20x6. This is what the question is being here. That means I will end up paying the annual investment installment of tablet devices are how much? $16,000 each. That means I will be paying how many $16,000? I will be paying two $16,000 each. The fair value doesn't matter, people, here. The fair value of the tablet is not at all important. It's about installment. I pay $16,000 for 2 years, in 2 years as installment. That means I'll end up paying $32,000. But unfortunately, it's a low value asset which has been leased for 3 years, guys. This $32,000 is paid to cover the whole 3 years time. So at that point of time, I consider this $32,000 is for either 3 years or 36 months. If it is for 3 years or 36 months, how much you have to consider for 1 year? All you have to do is, if $32,000 is for 3 years, how much would be for 1 year time? Do the cross multiplication. You shall get a value of how much? You shall get a value of close to 10,667. And the question here has clearly said you have to go to the nearest 1,000. The nearest answer is $11,000. Now, ma'am, such an easy question. Why would anybody would have gone ahead and got it wrong? We might have taken $26,000 instead of $32,000. Right? Yeah. Or we might have gone ahead and considered the liability. Let's see what the examiner has to say. They're trying to say, where did candidates go wrong? The question was performed least well in the case. There was a relatively equal spread of answers across, like A, C, and D, which consistent with the questions 3, suggests that many candidates had guessed the answer and had not studied this area of syllabus. I mean, they feel like the students have not studied. Guys, it's very simple. Whenever we have lease, it's not about the fair value of the asset. Correct. It's about what payments I am ready to pay. And if it is short-term lease, you don't have to do amortized cost. You don't have to discount anything. So the amount that I pay is for the total number of months, or it is total number of years. If it is a low-value asset, then I'm going to use it in the name of leases. That is where it's very important for us to have a strong syllabus content. Right? Let's move to the question number 5. What is the question number 5 that you can see? The property transaction qualified as a sale in accordance with IFRS 15 revenue from contracts with customer. The question is, what is the recognized gain on the sale of the property for the year ended. Guys, this question is purely talking about sale and lease back on that particular asset, which is used for what? Which is used in the sale and lease back option. So let me give you a small trick for you to understand this part. What is that trick? Whenever I sale and lease back, I say you sold both ownership and control of an asset. Yeah. But when you lease it back, you purchase control back. So you sold ownership and control, but you purchase control back. That means typically you have never sold control. You have sold only ownership. Right? So in this scenario, generally I tell, if I can find out the profit which is related to ownership, only that has to be recognized in P&L, because जो भी control का profit है ना, it is not something which is supposed to be recognized because I bought this back again. If you have never sold this, how can you go consider profit on this? How can you go consider gain on this? It's my job to find out that particular profit which is attributable only to the ownership of this particular sale. How do we do it? Very simple. Let's go back to the question that we have got. So, yeah. Clock & Company sold a property at its fair value of 7.4 million when the carrying amount was 5 million. So, guys, understand. I'm going to take a white page for you to understand. 7.4 million is the fair value of both ownership and control. Ownership and control. Okay. So how much is the fair value of it? Both 7.4 million, which I sold it. My carrying amount was 5 million. So can I say the profit element which is related to ownership and control is 2.4 million. This is the profit element. Guys, if I can find out what is the fair value of, control alone, can I also find out what is the fair value of ownership? I know both ownership and control together, I have a fair value of 7.4 million. If I know exactly how much is the fair value of control, the baki ka remainder amount is for the fair value of ownership. Yeah, look at this, all of you guys. If you can all see that I leased it back. I leased the asset back on 1st April X4. The first of 5 annual installments was 1.6 million was paid on 31st March X5, and the relevant 5-year discounting factor was 4.452. Guys, can I say, if you have studied present value of future lease payments, I'm sure we all know the present value of future lease payments are nothing but what? I'll take the future lease payment. In this scenario, how much is it? In this scenario, it is 1.6 million. And we also know the discounting factor. Can I simply say my lease liability value or the lease liability value or fair value of control was actually $7,123,000. Fair value of control was actually $7,123,000. Why am I using lease liability as fair value of control? Guys, if I am ready to purchase the control back, yeah, for a particular period of time, in present value terms, it has a value of 7,123,000. Isn't it the fair value of the control is people? Right? If I'm only purchasing it, that should be the fair value of control. So my total fair value of both ownership and control was 7.4 million, which had a profit of 5 million. In that, I eliminate the fair value of control. The baki ka value should give me what? The remaining value should typically give me the fair value of ownership. That is 7.4 million minus $7,123,000. The ownership is 277. Now, what you can do, if 7.4 million can have a profit of 5 million, how much a profit can have at $277,000? You can do cross multiplication. When you do cross multiplication, you should typically get an answer of 187.162. This is what I'm getting. Okay. Let's see what are the options that we have in this question. What? I'm sorry, the profit was not 5 million, my bad. It was The profit was not 5 million, the profit was 2.4 million. Let's redo the calculation. Profit was 2.4 million for 7.4 million of fair value, and for 277 the profit has to be 277. You do the cross multiplication. 277 multiplied with 2.4 divided with 7.4 shall give you an answer of $898,000. Now go back and check the options. Do we have 898,000 somewhere close to? Yep, 89,800 change. The closest answer has to be $90,000. That should be the answer. Are you guys able to? I'm sure you are able to understand. Yeah, but let's also see where did the candidates go wrong. The candidates went wrong. We calculated the total again, 2.4 million. The workout portion sold. I took the workout portion as sold, not the lease back. I would have recognized only that proportion of gain. Guys, you recognized full gain. You ignored the lease back restrictions, right? So that is where we go ahead and fail as candidates or the students. So now this is about section A and section B. Let's understand what went wrong in section C actually. So we should know what is section C talking about. They have selected two constructed response questions, Aqua and Partridge Company. That is also available in your ACCA practice platform. Let's see what they have asked for. See, Aqua is a financial statement analysis, an interpretation question for an individual entity, adjusting an adjustment for a foreign exchange difference, very nice. And Partridge Company is a consolidated financial preparation question, including the calculation of goodwill. So what these people have done, let's read. Aqua Company mein kya hua? Aqua Company required candidates to demonstrate what? To demonstrate and apply knowledge from the analyzing and interpreting financial statements area of the syllabus, and required a recommendation of for investing in one company only. The question contained both financial and non-financial information related to the entity. The analysis and interpretation of the individual company is important area of the syllabus. Okay, and that will be continued to be examined. Good. As in previous examination sessions, most students fail to score high marks on this question. The reason for this looks like a poor exam technique, like not addressing the requirement, not adequately using the information in the scenario, right? The focus for this detailed commentary, rather than simply recreating the suggested solution, will highlight the importance of using the scenario when constructing the answer of an interpretation question. Fair enough. We have three requirements on Aqua Company. One, calculate the pre-formatted, you have to calculate the ratio, gross profit, operating profit, ROCE, and gearing, that is calculated on debt by equity. So most of the students now will properly do this. Even I have seen in my very regular questions, the straightforward ratios, gearing formula was given. Okay, so if you do wrong formula again, then understand 0 marks, right? It was quite simple on the requirement A. And the requirement B, let's see what is the requirement B that was given. The requirement B was, or let's read the requirement B, or we'll go ahead and first find out what went wrong in requirement A. Because the common errors that they found out is student did not discount, or the student, never got into what? The student was not able to give the right formula. That's what they see. When calculating ratios, candidate must show their workings in full. Yes. So when you guys prepare for gross profit margin ratio, you can't write GP margin and, okay, this is 41%. How did you get this 41% is something that you have to show in workings in full. Yeah, most candidates performed well on this requirement. As I said, the common errors are you might use wrong formulas when especially calculating operating profit, because you might have gone ahead and used profit before financing and income tax for operating profit, but you should use operating profit margin, operating profit, but ROCE, profit before financing and income tax. When you use a wrong formula, you'll get 0 marks. And you calculate capital employed as solely debt or solely equity. No, it is debt plus equity, guys. Right? The capital employed is debt plus equity. Most of them has gone wrong here. And gearing, they've clearly said the formula that you have to use in the requirement is given debt divided by equity. No, our students will go ahead and do debt divided by equity. Debt divided by debt plus equity. So if you use your own figure rule, sorry, they will not give any marks. Now, if no formula was given, then you have used any of the formulas, then they will give you marks. Fair enough. They have asked you to use which formula and you're not using the same formula, then you're not respecting the examiner and they will not give you marks. Okay. Then comes the requirement B. What is the requirement B that they're asking about? It is about foreign exchange requirement. Calculate the foreign exchange difference using pre-formatted response provided. Recalculate Coral Company's operating profit, return on capital employed, curing. Let's see this part of the question what happened. See, let's also see what is the how the difference was calculated. Okay, foreign exchange difference at 31st December X5, 6 million dinars divided by 2, that gives you, okay, $3 million. And then 30th April, 6 million divided by 3. So, I mean, $1 is equals to 3 dinars. Okay. Yep. So, if you see this very closely, many candidates correctly calculated the forex gain and were able to increase the operating profit accordingly, whereas some candidates treated this incorrectly as loss. Most candidates did not recognize the effect of the foreign exchange difference in equity. Guys, whenever there is an increase in the profit, we should know it will also affect your retained earnings, which typically increase your equity. That part we have to make sure always. We can't consider saying that it will be having a lesser value. No, it will increase, right? Like if profit increases, your retained earnings also increases. So if you're not doing it, if you don't change the value in equity, then ROCE will not be calculated properly. Right? Yeah. So many candidates correctly calculated the gain, but you made the changes, but some of them couldn't consider this as a gain. They thought it's a loss. Right? Okay. Matlab, see, if you have a payable and there is a reduction in payable, it's a gain, guys. If you have a receivable, reduction in the receivable, then it's a loss. Sure. Always, let's see what examiner has to say. Any formula error penalized in requirement A was not subsequently penalized in part B due to the application of the own figure rule. This, however, did not apply to the gearing. Like they're trying to say that you have already reduced marks in requirement A. If the same thing was carried over here, they have not reduced further marks. That is what they're trying to say. We'll move to the requirement B. I'm sorry, let's go to the upcoming part. So the requirement C talks about analyze the performance and position of the potential acquisition target, explaining whether Aqua Company would exert control over its investment, and concluding with a clear recommendation on which company to invest. Guys, this question clearly talks about the potential acquisition target. You have to give only one company, right? So this part of the question test, including, like they're just mapped the syllabus, don't worry, including the interpretation of financial and non-financial information. Candidates needed to know how to analyze and interpret the information in the scenario to conclude on which one of two companies, either Aqua Company should invest in, and some short calculations were also required to determine the shareholding that Aqua Company could acquire as the influenced investment decision. See, if I have to simply say, this question talks, but where candidates went wrong, I mean, if you can read, the performance and interpretation question continues to be poor. Candidates are advised to read the following guidance carefully so that they can be prepared better. So, I mean, they're trying to say candidates continue to provide very generic answer that fail to relate to the information provided in the scenario. Iska matlab, we explained ratios very generically. We completely ignored the part that I have to apply the ratios on the question. Second, no marks were awarded for stating the constituent parts of the ratio calculation, or what the ratio means. Like you say, like GP margin matlab ye hai, this is operating profit margin, or this is ROC. Nobody will even care, guys. Yeah, and nor the marks awarded for stated that a ratio is better or worse. It's a very simple observation a 10th standard kid can do. You're an ACCA student and you are going to be a professional in the future. You're expected to do what? A good answer reflects on the information from the scenario, how it might have impacted, what is the change because of foreign exchange, what happens to your operating profit. I mean, if you make a changes, like will it increase your ROC, will it decrease your ROC, how it can impact the other things because of one change, one adjustment. Maybe it could be a foreign currency gain, which we know. Yeah, so it's always better that, because foreign currency gain is something which you can expect to have one-off gain, right? So you have ignored the control requirement. So if you want to acquire, you should acquire at control value. You need more percentage to acquire a company, correct? What they want you to do, they want you to link the ratios to debt maturity, one of forex gain, and ability to gain control, clear investment decisions with reasons. This is what they want. Okay, so which as a student we fail to observe that part. Yeah, you can take a pause, you can read. That was one of the question in section 8, which was single entity plus a forex plus an explanation of interpretation. Yeah, let's move to what happened to your Patridge company. See, Patridge company is a proper consolidation. The requirement expected you to prepare P&L, that is P&L and OCI, schedule of adjusted profits, financial position, statement of changes in equity, extracts. And I mean, isme you are expected to do one or more on this. What requirement they had? The requirement that they had is, the very first one is calculating the goodwill on the acquisition. Calculating the goodwill on acquisition, one of the requirement in Patridge company. This part of the question test, guys, calculation of goodwill is the easiest thing, but it is the heart of your consolidation. How do I know, ma'am? Ma'am, how do I calculate my goodwill at acquisition? You should take what is the purchase consideration. Second, the purchase consideration could be a share exchange, cash, deferred consideration, loan notes, contingent consideration, share-based payments. All of this you have to take into consideration and calculate the purchase consideration. Second, you need to know the fair value of net assets at acquisition. That means my subsidiary companies, strawberry companies, fair value of net assets at the date of acquisition, so that I know what is the total amount that I'm paying for the worth of asset. Agar kuch, if any kind of NCI is there, if any kind of non-controlling interest is there, I'm not acquiring, it's my job to eliminate that part from the fair value of net assets. So NCI can be calculated at fair value method. It can also be calculated at proportionate basis. Let's see what we have done. The custom, if it is deferred consideration, most of the students did not discount the deferred consideration to the present value. Purchase consideration gone. Problem. NCI was told to measure it. NCI was told to measure it non fair value method. What will you do? NCI percentage of shares into market value of subsidiary share. That's it. But most of the student incorrectly used full 1 million shares with the calculation. Yeah, or you used 80% of shares. Guys, what is it? How much ever I have acquired, how much ever a parent company is being acquired, the baki ka shares will go to non-controlling interest. That part of share multiplied with the market value of subsidiary on the date of acquisition should give me NCI at acquisition. And some students found the calculation of net assets at acquisition challenging. And most common errors related to the fair value of adjustment was inventory, inclusion share capital of strawberry company, and carrying amount of the net assets at acquisition was provided in note 2, and which already included these shares. So guys, sometimes when I give now, please read. Okay. Yeah. So you have calculated NCI wrongly. Correct. You have calculated NCI wrongly. And second thing is, you're also talking about what? You're also, as a student, like you have not discounted for deferred consideration and you've included the share capital twice. Not possible. Correct? Yeah. Then comes then comes the requirement B. Let's see. They're asked you to prepare P&L for the year ended 31st March X6. Guys, you need to know what are the intra-group transactions and how it impacts your P&L. If you don't know that, trust me, consolidated P&L is the last thing that you can ever do in your life. So maybe it could be an intra-group sale, or it could be because of provision for unrealized profit, or it could be because of intra-group loans, intra-group interest, dividend paid by the subsidiary. A sub, I have to reduce it. Goodwill impairment, correct? All of these adjustments I should know. So performance on this part of the question was mixed, where students were able to, few were able to do, few were not able to do. It is always recommended. Oh, right. It is always recommended that candidates set up a pro forma. What is pro forma? A format for the consolidation immediately. Once the pro forma has been set up, candidates should include the results of the parent and subsidiary for income and expenses on a line by line basis. However, candidates must check when the subsidiary was acquired. Yeah, if it is 12 months before, then 12 months before. If it is 6 months before, then you'll go ahead and consider only 6 months. Okay, but let's also see where the students went wrong. See, yep, slightly erroneous. Yep. So then candidates should add the subsidiary for the particular current year, but if it is mid-year, you have to go ahead and pre-time apportion. Here the question was told to you on 1st July X5. The consolidation should be time apportion for the 9 months, 9 by 12 months of all the income and expenses of Strawberry Company. But many of the students may have presented separately from the financial statements being prepared. Guys, you see, even I do that in my classes. I write the show the value, and then I will go ahead and put it in the cell also, so that you know, if you're separately showing in the financial statements, you don't have to show that separately in the function. You can directly do that. Okay, you don't have to separately be showing us the working. Not required. This is an unnecessary element that any student is making, this parts. Okay, if you're able to present it here, that's more than enough, right? That was the problem for the examiner. Then next, what is the problem? Note that the interest expenses on unwinding discount related to the deferred consideration in note 1, candidates were not penalized if they have included all the interest expenses in one line. Yeah, it's okay. What is interest expenses is being given in one line, like, yeah, where you have written in the separate line, or you are writing together, that is not a big deal. It won't make a big difference. But however, as in previous diets, many students adjusted the subsidiary results incorrectly by either using an incorrect number of months, either not 9 months, or not apportioning it at all, or take the whole year. Yeah. Then candidates are once again reminded that a statement of P&L is a summary of performance for a period of time, and therefore failure to time apportion is considered to be a fundamental accounting error. Several students incorrectly applied the proportionate consolidation by multiplying the results of subsidiary by 80%. Again, no, guys, consolidation is line by line. We don't time apportion, it's a fundamental accounting error. You go take the subsidiary's profit, time apportion, then apply 80%. No, at the end we any which way show how much is the amount which goes to NCI and the owners. You don't have to separately show that 80% once again, right? Yeah. Apart from all of this, yeah, so intra-group adjustments was tested, like, yeah, you can see we got some intra-group adjustments were set up, like this was about the interest expenses. So there were some intra-group adjustments was tested, like provision for unrealized profit. Like, let's read what they have asked for. So in note 2, they asked about a subsequent measurement of fair value of adjustments. This note was firstly used to calculate the net assets at acquisition, because net assets are used in calculating goodwill calculation. Correct? It had 2 fair value adjustments. Let's see what these people have done, what the students have done. The first relates to depreciating the plant, fair value adjustment. Most students have correctly done plant, and I'm sure after that you have to go ahead and charge the depreciation for the annual depreciation for the group and post-acquisition profit of the subsidiary, but it has to be apportioned by 9 months. But the candidates incorrectly dealt the adjustment in the first requirement on their own rule. They applied their own related depreciation expenses. No, that is not something that we have to do. And second thing, inventory valuation. An adjustment was $100,000 was included in the net assets, where candidates incorrectly adjusted net assets in the first requirement. The own figure rule was applied. And you have deducted cost of sales. Guys, inventory was there at the date of acquisition and it was sold later. Then only you go reduce cost of sales. Otherwise, no adjustment at all. And there was some PERP, that is provision for unrealized profits. Many candidates have done the correct one. The common error is calculating the profit element was based on the sale of 3 million using margin. Basic maths mistake, guys. Margin and markup was the mistake. So the examiner also is talking about intra-group dividend, where if you have an intra-group dividend, it is something that you have to eliminate from where? Something which you have to eliminate from the consolidated P&L, because it will be after acquisition. I can't recognize my own dividend in my books of accounts, right? But what has happened to the students? Let's see that. Sorry. So we paid a dividend, that is subsidiary paid a dividend of 2 million, and this was after acquisition. So Patridge company would have received 80% of this, and it is something which you have to reduce it from the P&L. Most candidates made an adjustment for the intra-group dividend but eliminated the full dividend. We have to do, and guys, don't time apportion the dividend. Dividends are never time apportioned. Dividend is a cash outflow. It is not accrued. It's not an expense. It's not an income to accrue it over the period of time. Few people have either considered the whole 2 million, or else few people have gone ahead and time apportioned it. Both are a mistake. Yeah. So this was the section C part. Okay. So if these are all the major mistakes, will I lose the whole marks? Will I lose the whole mark? No, not at all. My section C is that kind of syllabus where they will give you step marking. Yeah. So, and that's the key message from the ACCA examiner's report. Okay. So I would say success isn't just about knowing the standards. It's about answering the question the examiner is actually asking. It's not about what you know. It's about what they're asking. Use this feedback. Fix these mistakes if you're also doing. Yeah. If you've been losing marks in FR, now you know why, right? And more important, you know how to fix it. Apply these examiner what they're telling here. You try to apply that in your answer, and those last marks can quickly turn into a pass. You can easily get that 47, 46 to be 50 or 51. This shows what separate average answers from high scoring ones. If you study with these points in mind, like you've practiced them while you're solving questions, then your FR results will easily be improved. Now, all of you guys, you can walk into the exam with far more confident and prepared. If you found this breakdown very helpful, make sure you save it, share it with your fellow FR student, and subscribe for more exam-focused ACCA support, and good luck with your exam. And remember, the examiner has already told you how to pass. Don't miss that part. Thank you, people.